The Search Podcast USA Edition series is sponsored by Ascen. Ascen is a top employer of record in North America that exclusively helps staffing and recruitment agencies hire contractors compliantly throughout the US and Canada. Ascen's all-in-one white-label platform handles onboarding, timesheets, payroll, benefits, insurance, invoicing, and optional financing so you can grow quickly in the US and Canada. Start growing your staffing agency in the US today with Ascen. Visit us at ascen.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Search Podcast. And we're into a new week and a new guest. Someone who I've known in the industry for many, many years, has done some phenomenal things, but I'll let him take away an introduction of who he is and tell us a little bit more about himself.
Thanks, Elliott. Hi everyone, I'm Hugo Sugden. I am the co-founder of GQR and founder of Tangeny. Quick bit about me. I've been in recruitment for almost 20 years. So started at a now very big recruitment firm by the name of Faidon International. I was actually employee number 7 or 8 actually in the organization all the way
Yeah,
back in 2007. And I spent a good couple of years there, good performer in the investment banking space, and then decided that it was my time to spread my wings, go and launch my own business with Stephen Talbot, a company called GQR.
yeah,
So in 2009, launched GQR in the UK, specialising in investment banking. And then over the course of a 12-year journey, took the business from myself and Stephen up to about 300 heads, doing about 300 million in revenue and about 120 million in GP.
amazing.
So started in the UK in 2009, like I mentioned, ended up launching our first office in about 2011. Stephen went to Los Angeles to go and capture the technology market. In 2014, I launched the New York business with my CSO at the time, a guy called Sam Totten. And 2016, after 2 years of building out the New York business, I went to Sydney, Australia, where we built an office to about 20 people again till
Amazing.
2018. And then in 2018, I would call back to the mothership, the US market, our dominating market for GQR, to help Stephen really drive growth in the LA business. At that time, we were about 25 people, and then really built that out for 2 years, grew it to about sort of 45, 50 people in that market. Did a brief stop over in Austin, Texas, to work with our regional director there to really build into our healthcare offering, which is
Yeah,
where we launched. And then in 2020, moved back to the UK with a view to going out to Dusseldorf in April 2020. The date may be familiar with you.
yeah,
So that was promptly cancelled in March 2020. And then we went into basically salvation mode. So it's just making sure that we kept the business intact, make sure that we continue to deliver a great service to our clients, and obviously keep the revenues coming through the door. We managed to do that very well, and we actually were one of the few businesses that actually had a stronger year in 2020. And then in 2021, we were really well positioned, very strong
yeah.
in terms of delivery, good diversity in terms of skill set offering, and also geographical spread. So we took the business to market. I ended up then doing an MBO. A business partner raised institutional debt, used institutional debt, and then bought out the majority of my shares. I'm still obviously the co-founder of that business. I still support them at arm's length, and still have very fond relationships with the CRO, CEO, etc. over there.
Fantastic.
Um,
Brilliant.
and then after I sold the business, I stayed on with them for about 18 months, just supporting in terms of like the succession planning around taking my role and driving the performance of the firm. I went into M&A where I supported the business in procuring potentially fitting organizations to try and grow inorganic growth with the organization, and prospected a few firms that led on to be bolt-ons to the business that it is today.
Phenomenal. Wow, what a journey. Okay, fine. Well, look, Thank you for sharing that. And I would love to know, because this podcast is predominantly like, with a strong US focus, how much did going over to the States for your business at the time change everything for you and become the big focus for for you guys and your growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. Quite honestly, it's tremendous. The impact was enormous for the organization. I remember going across in 2014, and obviously Stephen was already ahead of me and over in LA. When we did the market analysis, we saw that at the point in time, there's roughly about half the amount of recruiting firms, and the population was just from a raw statistic perspective was 6 times the size. So that we knew that the UK market, and that was back then when it wasn't nearly as saturated as it is today, that there was like massive opportunity. We were also really careful to review like relevant salaries, both basic salaries as well as total compensation, and saw that there was a marked increase in terms of base and total compensation over the EMEA market. So we saw that by naturally just doing the same work in the US geography, we were going to realize about a 40% uplift in the comparative markets that we were trading in at that time, which was
Yeah,
predominantly investment banking, technology, and life sciences. And then the second thing we looked at is just like I think a lot of the sentiment or culture in the US is about speculating, and it's like really investing in entrepreneurs and partnering with businesses that try to deliver value. And as a
yeah,
result of that, the terms of business that we had, like traditionally in London, were about 20 to 22.5%. And we had multiple clients that we were operating at like 25 to 30%. So the value proposition in terms of being in the US is not only was it a much bigger market for us in terms of like from a TAM perspective, but also is way more lucrative by virtue of salaries being higher and fee rates. So that compounded to have like a massive knock-on effect to our performance per head.
yeah. Fantastic. And when you went over to the States, and you saw the differences, and nowadays you're talking to lots of different companies, and learning kind of a bit more about what other firms are doing. Do you think it's and I want to use this word, but lightly, that a necessity and or an important area of growth for firms to start considering, to also do what you did with the US and see the potential and how beneficial it's for their businesses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it really depends. I'm not going to try and give you a wishy-washy answer.
Yeah,
It depends what type of business you're trying to be. If you're really trying to like scale a big lucrative business, I think the US is a very valuable component of doing that. If you're just trying to be a boutique of like 5 people, for example, like high performing businesses, we have a lot of them in our Town Journey portfolio where they're doing like three, four, 500 grand ahead. You don't need to go to the US to do
nah,
that. So if you're looking for scale, the US for me is like a prerequisite. Like if you're
yeah,
looking for significant scale, there is definitely a strong argument to go to the US, even as a boutique, because like I mentioned earlier, like the value of the fees and also just the sentiment around doing business with new up and coming entrepreneurs and smaller businesses, I think is greater out there. But there is a big trade-off.
yeah,
We see a lot of firms that go, we want to go to the US because it's really lucrative to be out there, but then end up cannibalizing their existing business to
yeah,
break into a brand new territory. It's definitely not. I would definitely like to dissolve this misnomer that it's like shooting fish in a barrel because it's absolutely
yeah.
not. Recruitment is still tough, and building your reputation takes time, and you have to like really prove yourselves. But if you do that successfully and you do it in a very measured way, it's a very, very lucrative thing that you can do for your
Fun.
business. So I think it is. I think for those seeking scale and absolutely committed to long term in terms of building a bigger business, I think the US is a very valuable play. I think if you're a smaller business, yes, I'd still consider the US, but just do it in a very measured way. So look at things like the 70-20-10 model, where
Yeah.
you're diversifying existing low hanging business into the US, but still delivering your core valuable contribution to your EMEA clients.
Amazing, fine. And before we move on from this particular area of conversation and talk a bit more about, the current market and obviously what you're doing now, was there any particular challenges that you faced when, when you went and took on this expansion and this growth, was there anything that you kind of stood there and said to, yourself maybe today or maybe to even other businesses, by the
Yeah.
way, I experienced X, just be mindful of this.
Yeah, definitely. I had one of our members reach out and said, Hugo, um, like going on this journey to US has been awesome, but God, no one told me that they're going to pay you by check. And it's like 90 days payment terms, and it takes 90 days then to clear that check. It's like 180 days to get paid on an invoice. So there are
Yeah,
definitely little things like that, and there are definitely workarounds. And we worked with that founder to come up with more digitized solutions. Um, but bigger headline ones. I'd say the biggest one for me is like the reason why so many businesses are great businesses because they've got outstanding culture. And especially if it's a singular founder run business, it's very hard to like disseminate that culture well, especially if the founder is not prepared, like yourself, to travel an awful lot of their time because they've got family commitments, etc. So the first thing I consider in terms of going to the US is how are you going to get your DNA out there?
yeah,
How are you going to instill your culture? And largely for me and Stephen, that was literally relocating. So Stephen relocated full time to Los Angeles. And for me, when we launched New York, I relocated to New York for 2 years. I was actually only planning to be there for 6 weeks, which is a great example because I realized actually part of the reason why we were growing and we were building so much success in the early days is because I was there full time and Stephen was there like part time. So we were
yeah,
able to like insert that like DNA. So that's a really big consideration. Second is logistical. Obviously, there's a lot of political turmoil going on in the US at the moment. E2 treaty program is still in place. That's still relatively, with an asterisk, straightforward in terms of the application process. So that's a big consideration. If you are looking to hire people out there and actually build an office, you need to become E2 sponsored. And then also thinking about your recruiting strategy as well. Like I mentioned, on the flip side, the upside of fees being higher, salaries are higher. You're
yeah,
looking at entry level salaries now for like a grad recruiter. You'd know better than me, obviously being a recruiter, but roughly it's about 45, 50 grand in
exactly. Yeah,
as a starting salary.
at least.
And when you're looking at like the conversion ratios we've got at like 1.25 at the moment, it's like a 40K base to have someone with no experience. And then you've got to think about the infrastructure, putting that infrastructure in place to train people, give your people that opportunity to be really successful in that go to market. Otherwise, it can just be a very expensive hiding to nothing.
Absolutely. Fine. Well, thank you for that. But no, totally agree with you. And I've spoken to many businesses that have experienced all of these challenges and come up with these, I wouldn't say problems as such, but differences, if you like, within, with these expansions that they have. Just talking about kind of like what, if you don't mind sharing, what's your perception now back in the UK of the market and, how are you seeing things in the recruitment industry? I mean, look, you're in touch with through Talent Journey, multiple companies and speaking to multiple founders. What's your perception on the market at the minute?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I get asked this quite a lot, and the diversity of answer for my founders, like who are in the Town Journey portfolios, lots of people are saying like it's really hard at the moment, and I think they're really correlating performance to actually the market or the state of the economy. Whereas I speak to other founders who are absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
We literally just had one of our founders who joined us about 5 months ago just did a 230 grand month and said, the market's flying. But ironically, at the same time, I'm having the same conversation with people who are also in that market saying it's really tough. So I would say the market is neither in a bear or a bull market. I'd say it's pretty much in a base market. 2023 was horrific across
Yeah.
multiple markets, especially like for us, life sciences was horrendous because all that dry powder dried up over at the private equity firms that were funding like biotech sort of growth strategies. Um, and I know a lot of markets got hit really hard, but in terms of the market right now, we're seeing a really wide range in terms of like relevant performance levels, and they're not isolated to certain industries. A lot of people have this like misnomer that if you are a recruitment firm and you operate in AI, you're killing it. I think far from it, actually. I think everyone's trying to do it.
Yeah.
And it's historically and traditionally very hard to get into like tech startups, because for a start, they don't even have phone numbers. So let alone like getting that engagement. But I'd say like from like a holistic level, I think we're very much in a base level market where it's not hard, but it's not easy. But the really high performers and like the very specialist firms who have got good relationships are continuing to do very well. But those who are trying to break into the market, who don't have those relationships and do not have really efficient processes, are struggling.
Absolutely. Fine. Well, look, yeah, I mean, I speak to a lot of founders, just, talking to them because of what I do naturally every week. And there's some firms, yeah, I agree, that are doing incredibly well, but they're doing things differently. They're not getting distracted by the noise. They're staying in their lane. They're offering their services that they believe in, and they're taking a notice of what else, what everyone else is doing. And yeah, there's some firms that are absolutely crushing it. So they're obviously doing
Yeah.
something right, but the market's not as bad as it's perceived to be. And if you block out all the noise on LinkedIn, for example, of what's going on out there and how things have been, it that doesn't matter. Just, it's, as you said, people are doing as well as they need to be. In terms of talent journey, then, which we've discussed and dropped in on this podcast. Tell us about what talent journey is all about. What's going on with that? How are you helping businesses? And having kind of worked with you guys and seen what you've been doing the last 6 months, it's absolutely seems to be it's flying.
Yeah, look, thanks, Harry. Just before I do that, I want to talk to your point in terms of noise. That is
Yes.
that is huge, and I think you're absolutely on the money there. We speak to obviously like we speak to hundreds of founders, and since we launched, and this sort of plays into what I'll tell you next. Since we launched in October, we've now got 50 founders in the platform. Sorry, 50 businesses. We've got
Yeah.
about the 87 founders, because obviously a lot of businesses are partnership businesses. But that noise component is huge. And
Yeah.
I talk about LinkedIn very positively. It's like the backbone of a lot of like prospecting in terms of like from a market mapping perspective, market sizing, and then obviously like the building blocks is like very, very valuable. But it is also a tremendous distraction. And there is so much technology out now, that so many recruiters and founders are basically looking to that technology as a solve,
Yeah.
as opposed to focusing on what their true USP is.
Yeah.
So I think that the noise component, I think I do kind of feel sorry for founders who are like launching now and launched over the last couple of years. Because when I started back in 2009, when Stephen and I launched GQR, we didn't have all these tools, which was a disadvantage in comparison today, because there's a lot of great tools out there, but was also an advantage because we then knew exactly what we needed to do to be successful, and we knew exactly how to focus on the most important things: building relationships and influencing people, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that's a really big component that people don't talk about enough, is like that noise and being able to shut that noise out. And like one of the very first things that we do is we look at how people structure their time in their business. And that noise component is like a huge detractor. And we've seen massive performance gains just working really on structuring time and like focus times versus creative times and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to Town Journey. So like I mentioned, Town Journey was basically inspired for when I was doing M&A for GQR. So once we did that MBO, I was very fortunate. I had a very good exit from that organization. I went into M&A, and my job was to ideate, and then assess like really good recruitment firms that we think would be natural complementary plays for GQR. And I probably spoke to about 200 founders over the course of a year. What we noticed very quickly was there was very low hanging fruit for these businesses to really accelerate performance. And it normally started in like the specialization that they had, the brand that they were getting out there, how they were hiring people, how they were developing people, how they were performance managing, and then most importantly, how they were retaining their people. And there were normally a couple of breakages in each of the firms. And these are the good firms as well. And we had our fair share of those challenges and continue to do so at GQR as we continue to grow and evolve with the markets. But for me, that I really identified that there was a huge gap in the market for a platform that could, one, train the theoretical side, like this is how you set up a business. This is how you put in really good platforms in order to enable people to be efficient. And then this is how you design really good processes. When
Yeah.
you've nailed your platform setup and you've got really efficient processes, then you start hiring people. And that's where you start talking about your EVPs, your employer value propositions. How do you identify the right people to work for your organization, and what role do they play in the firm in order to help drive its commercial growth?
Yeah.
So basically, what we do is we created a platform that's got 150 modules. It's got, thanks to yourself as well as a contributor, we've got, I think now 15 masterclasses. We've got like 50 expert learns that teach people the theoretical side.
Yeah.
And then what we did is we said, look, founders are really busy. I've been there. Like, you're doing a million things at once. So not only do they want the support in terms of like to the understanding of how to do it theoretically, but they actually want the practical application. So what we did is we built an advisory team of some of, in our minds, some of the best capable skill sets in the industry. And our advisory team actually works directly with the founder to help them build their business for performance. A lot of people think it's just scales and like growing headcount. It's actually quite the opposite. Most of our businesses are like boutique businesses, and they just want to drive. They want to go from 20 grand a head a month to 50 grand a head a month. So what we do is we actually work on those principles, building a really strong culture, aligning the market strategy to the growth ambitions of the firm, making sure that they're hiring the right people to do the right roles within that organization, and then performance managing that team to make sure you're getting the absolute best out of them. So you as a business grow, but also you give opportunity for your employees to realize the best returns for their
Yeah.
investment in the organization. That's essentially what we've done. Like I mentioned, we launched in October. We've now got 50 businesses, 87 founders in the portfolio. It's going really, really well. And what we're essentially doing is we're giving founders that shortcut in how to get to efficiency as quickly as possible.
Is there one particular thing that you've been, I suppose, asked about the most when you come, bring these companies on board to Talent Journey that you seem, that seems to be like a common struggle or need of, an area of support? Is there something that's like a common theme?
There are two
Two.
equally sized themes. One is always BD. It's like, we want more clients. How do we get
Yeah.
more clients? So that's working on like driving efficiencies through the BD funnel. Not just your traditional like get on the phone and make tons of calls, but also looking at like your proper nurturing strategy, not just sending emails, but actually engaging, nurturing, offering points of reference, demonstrating capability, skill sets, all this sort of stuff. And then also like the social selling side, like
Yeah.
that's become increasingly important, building your brand awareness and then using like social avenues in order to drive engagement is one. And then the other one is really around the optimization of people in the firm. We come across tons of founders who are great billers. They're like tentpole billers within an organization. They bill a lot, and then they hire a couple of people, think they can do the same as me, and that's not the case. So what
Mm.
those founders typically engage us on is like working with them to create a succession plan to allow people to grow within the organization and decentralize the founder from being the source of revenue generation.
Yeah.
So putting in like development plans, like how to develop the skill set, and then performance plans around how to make sure that they're maximizing their performance within the business is like probably the two really big areas. And we probably spend hundreds of hours every month with that across our L&D, performance optimization, and then the exec advisory side.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, so just to give an example, like, and I've spoken to multiple founders, I've mentioned obviously what you guys are doing. Whatever the case may be within a particular business in recruitment, for example, you guys have an expert at hand on call that will support and guide them from every angle.
Yeah, so it's a good one. Like, so we call it like the boardroom. So
Yes.
we've got basically five C-suite members of Talent Journey that cover. So I cover like the exec advisory, which is all like the wider like commercial vision, market strategy, human capital strategy, and then through like the financial management of the organization through cash
Yeah.
flow planning, resource planning, etc. And then we have people who look on the operational side. So our COO looks at like all the operational side of their business to make sure they're operating really efficiently. This is particularly useful for contract businesses. Our CTO looks at their entire tech stack. So disassembles like, okay, how are you engaging with your CRM? What tools are you APIing into your CRM to make sure you gain maximum efficiency? And what are you automating and what can you automate better within your organization? The CLO looks at, it's all about like how capable you are. So the capability skill sets, how strong are your leaders in terms of developing the individuals? Are you getting the most out of your top billers? And how do you prevent churn at the bottom level from underperformance? So that's what they focus on. Head of talent focuses on making sure you've got really good talent framework. So not only are you hiring the right people, but are you hiring the right people into the right roles in a scientific way, as opposed to having a chat with them. Oh, I like Elliott. He's a really nice guy. I think I can have a beer with him. Let's give him a shot, see if he works out. It's actually coming at it very scientifically, look at all the quotient scoring. And what we do is we build the framework. And then with our larger clients, we literally do it for them as well. So we demonstrate this is how you identify talent, and then we bring in candidates into the funnel and then interview them with their founders to show them how they should be doing it to assess the talent of the right people for the right roles. And then our CRO looks at performance optimization. So that is everything from looking at your TAM, SAM, and so on, how big your market is, how much you're capturing, but also looking at the conversion funnel analytics. So if you are only, let's say you're getting 5 candidates to a vacancy and you're only getting 1 interview request, that normally indicates that you're not quite on the money in terms of understanding requisitions. So you need to develop your people to become more specialized in terms of understanding what those specific requisites are, all the way through to offer management and then through to performance frameworks. So that is everything from like monthly performance reviews through to performance dashboards, so that you have a really good understanding in terms of how your people are performing, and most importantly, where you can develop them to become better performers. A lot of people ask me, it says, like, what is it? Why do you, some people are like really high performers and other people are not? And my typical answer is it comes down to efficiency. It's those incremental gains all the way through the funnel. Yes, they're doing more calls, but they're targeting the right people. They've got a slightly better pitch when they speak to them, so they get better level engagement. When they then get the vacancy, they have a slightly better understanding of that vacancy and the types of questions to ask, and those hooks into potential candidates, which means they get a slightly better conversion ratio. And then they're slightly better at closing out those processes, like the offer management process. And when you actually add them all up, you're literally compounding 400-500% returns. So that person, we at GQR, we have a lot of people who are really good billers who are like billing 300K, 400K, but we also have people sat next to them doing like $1, $2, $3 million a year. And it's not a case that that person sat to the right of them is 10 times better. They're just incrementally better at everything through that funnel, which just delivers like massive ROI for them. So that's what we do, is we help those consultants through the founders just improve every element of their game. So
Fantastic.
the technology runs better. They're trained to a higher degree. They're more structured and focused when we talk about the noise, and they're delivering better conversions through the pipeline.
Incredible. And last question for you, Hugo, before I let you go. In a sort of a nutshell, what's the plans for H2, the rest of this year for the business, and where do you see it going? And then are you going to just keep it the same? Do you envisage doing anything different?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I believe in specialization. So we're not going to try and go too broad. We want to capture 1% of the market. The market presently in the UK is about 30,000 recruitment firms. Our SAM in terms of the addressable about 29,000 of that 30,000. So we want to get to a point where we get critical mass, which is the 1%. One of my 2 business partners is Australian, and he's going to be relocating to Australia towards the end of this year, mid next year. So we do very much have our eyes in terms of breaking out into the Australian market. And then, like we mentioned, the theme of this conversation, the US, it's a real powerhouse opportunity for the recruitment sector, people trading in it, and then people like ourselves supporting it. So longer term, we do have ambitions where we'd like to be in the US supporting those US businesses, but remaining true to our philosophy, we want to get absolute specialization,
Yeah.
build that critical mass, and then continue to enrich the platform and the community. So the community gets so much from each other. Like we've now got, for example, multiple different firms that specialize in just machine learning, connecting those people, and they're actually collaborating on jobs and deals and that kind of stuff, but also just empowering themselves. We want to build up that critical mass. And then in the platform, just keep enriching it. We've got 150 modules of really solid content, but like every week we're adding more modules and we're getting experts like yourself and the talent space to be contributing on the masterclasses side and the expert learn side. So continue to build that. So the short-term goal is get to critical mass in the UK, branch out into Australia, where both Reese and I have very good like deep networks, and then longer term play is tech integration, of course. The days of being able to build your own AI LMM models are very much here and at a very fraction of the cost that it used to be even a year or 2 years ago. So we're obviously engaging on that side of things and just continuing to enrich all of our data to give our members a even better experience.
Amazing. Hugo, I can listen to your story a lot longer, and everything you say is very interesting. I'm actually enjoying my own, which I do obviously anyway, my own podcast, just listening to and learning from what you're saying. But no, look, I really appreciate your time. And, if anyone listening to this is interested in Talent Journey, reach out to me, reach out to Hugo directly. We're going to plug everything onto our socials in terms of, what these guys are all about, what they're doing with all the relevant contacts. But no, look, it's been amazing listening to all of that. Thank you very much for sharing it all with me. And I'm excited to see where you guys take the business moving forward and what's next for you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Elliot. And likewise, obviously, you guys for True is a great channel partner of ours. I know we're still fairly small, though we're obviously getting tremendous traction in the marketplace.
Yeah,
But we're like what 5 or 6 firms now engaged with True, saying how good it is for those who are seeking like offshore talent to support with literally onshore quality. So
yeah,
look, thank you, Elliot. It's been amazing having your support, and that obviously trickles down to our founders, and appreciate
yeah.
spending time with you today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, and look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Elliot.